So Michael Bloomberg, former presidential candidate, billionaire Michael Bloomberg, has just, he's got his own network, right? So he can just write an opinion piece and then put it on his own network, right?
Yeah.
That's what he can do, right?
We can do that too.
We can do that too, except
On
we don't have
morninginvest.com.
Exactly. We don't have quite the reach that Michael Bloomberg does.
Sure we
as a
do.
billionaire. But anyway, he has penned a piece, a really scathing opinion piece for Democrats. And it all centers around what just happened with that school board out in San Francisco, which, of course, to provide some context here, that school board, a couple of members of the school board were recalled because of their stance around school closures and mask mandates and other things, right?
Well, their stance was to do nothing. They kept the schools closed for the entire 2021-2022 school year. No, that's what we're in now. 2020-2021. Last school year, not the one we're in right now. They kept schools closed. Some of the high schools opened for a total of 1 day in order to collect federal funds. But the school board was not at all interested in getting kids back in school, despite many reports that children were falling behind, that children were developing social anxiety, and the other school districts were opening to great effect under safety protocols. And that school board did nothing, but they did in the same academic year change the name of 44 schools in their district because they thought that they were not inclusive. So while they were focusing on these, what we call woke issues, right? That's not to say that there are not reasons to reconsider naming things after Abraham Lincoln. Sure, we can talk about that, but how about we don't talk about what the school's called if there are no little butts in the seats, right? And so parents stood up. Now, look, no one in San Francisco is going to elect any Republicans anytime soon, right? But it does go to show that while Democrats are focusing on these non-working class woke issues, we do have real working class problems that need solutions, and that voters are not going to stand for it anymore.
Right. So while Democrats are so busy focused on pronouns and gender identity and defunding the police and other issues like this, and we have actual problems in actual schools. And so these woke members of the school board in San Francisco were recalled. And that's what Michael Bloomberg says is a huge problem. And it's a huge wake-up call for Democrats that they need to be paying attention to this as they head into 2022 and into the election season. He basically says that the political earthquake that just occurred in San Francisco would be a dire warning for the National Democratic Party because the same fault line stretches across the country and tremors are only increasing. He said 3 months after Republicans scored major election upsets in Virginia and New Jersey, largely because of the frustration parents felt with the Democratic officials who catered to teachers' unions and culture warriors at the expense of children, voters in San Francisco recalled three school board members by margins of nearly 3-1. Coming to America's most liberal city, those results should translate into a 7 to 8 on the Richter scale, because the three main factors that drove the recall are not unique to the Bay Area.
The three main factors that drove the recall, which were school closures, basically. Right. And so at this point, it's no longer about these single issue voters who care about, I don't want to minimize these, transgender rights or inclusive naming of things or anything like that we're considering woke politics. But really, it's time to prioritize, right? And talk about things that affect working class families, that affect all of us, no matter what our pronouns are, right? You can have a transgendered family. You can have a transgendered member of your family. You can have people who feel like going to a school named after someone who owned slaves is disenfranchising. Sure, but if nobody's going, who cares, right? And so Democrats absolutely do not want working class fights. They pretend that they do, but they don't. That's what we learned from the trucker rally, right? Is that like when working class people stand up for their rights to protest against vaccine mandates, not vaccines, but mandates, we don't want to hear it. We don't.
We have no food on our shelves, and we have people sleeping in tents out in your street in San Francisco. You have a huge homeless population problem like in San Francisco, and you have no one in your schools and kids aren't there. That's a bigger problem to me than the naming of a school.
Yes. What were you going to say, David?
Well, I was just going to say that's why it's so important to support these truckers, because they are all of us. They represent the the United States as like every race, color, creed, everything, and they're working class people. These are the people we need to be supporting.
Yes, and I do feel very much like I had seen some people in the chat and some comments online saying, oh, but these are just white dudes, at this trucker rally. And that's not true. And also, more than white dudes are the beneficiaries of what is trucked inside our house. I know I've said this before, and I'll remind you every single time. Everything in your house was brought to you by a trucking company. Every single stinking thing. Unless you are the kind of person who seeds your fruit from last year's fruit or vegetables, even the seeds in your garden were trucked. We are absolutely dependent on that. And that has nothing to do with your pronouns. It has nothing to do with your sexual orientation or your gender or your race at all. Everything in your house comes from a trucker. And so working class issues right now are things that make politicians very uncomfortable. So they decide instead to work on these issues. Again, I'm fine with having a conversation about the naming of things. What's the new Washington Redskins, the new Washington Nationals? Commanders, right? Whatever. Let's have that discussion.
Wouldn't that have been funny? The Washington Nationalists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The colonizers.
Yeah.
But if nobody's in the school, who cares, right? That's not what you were elected to do.
Yeah.
Even the mayor of San Francisco came out and said, this is unacceptable, but she had no power.
Well, and we brought you the story 2 weeks ago here on the show about the woman from Levi Strauss who was in line to be the new CEO, and she was speaking out against school closures, so much so in California that she said, I'm moving my family out of California, I'm moving to Colorado because I'm noticing the decline in my children. I'm seeing it in my kindergarten. I'm seeing it's happening to these children, the socialization and their learning abilities, and all of this stuff is going down. Graduation rates are down, everything. So I'm moving because I believe in this. And then she was basically fired because of her stance on that. Like, this is the kind of woke politics that's going to crumble the Democratic Party. Now, meanwhile, Republicans are putting forth an 11-point plan.
But let me just say this because the Republicans like to talk a big game about these woke politics, but they don't actually do it. Like, Joe Biden had plenty of things to say about equality that did not even make his agenda in his first year, right? So talking about it and doing anything about it are completely different things.
Well, that's what they always do. It's culture politics, right? So I will run on the idea of ending abortions, right? I will run on the idea of X, Y, and Z when in actuality they get in office and they don't do any of that stuff.
Right.
They pay lip service to it. And what they're doing is protecting and making sure that big business is taken care of.
So for us, when we hear the Democrats start to, campaign on like changing the names of sports teams or whatever, let's just tune that out at this point until we actually have a society that is up and functioning again.
Yeah. So Rick Scott, Republican, has come up with his plan, though, to rescue America. So while we hear, the infrastructure bill is dead, Build Back Better is dead, Americans right now are like, what do you guys stand for? Do you guys have anything? And you have to say, at least some Republican is actually putting forth a plan. Now, it should be pointed out that this plan is actually a break from where Leader Mitch McConnell stands on many of these issues. But is this him sort of setting himself up for a presidential run? Here is Senator Rick Scott's 11-point plan to bring back America.
Right. This was, meanwhile, Mitch McConnell has 0-point plan, right? So he has not endorsed this plan, but he also did not give him authorization to come out and speak on behalf of the Republican Party. But let's go over the highlights, right? The things that Rick Scott thinks that Republicans need to stand for in order to reclaim power in legislation. He wants to make everyone salute the flag and for schools to teach the 3 R's. Not critical race theory. So that's reading, writing, arithmetic, right?
Okay.
I had to remind myself one of the 3 R's. I was like, is that a piece of...
Well, I always hate that they say 3 R's when it's arithmetic.
I know. It's so stupid.
Like, well, okay. You mean 2 R's and an A?
Yes.
Okay, but let's call it 3 R's.
Okay.
But the number one thing on your list is that we have to pledge allegiance to the flag.
This, again, is so interesting, right? Because this is part of our Constitution that you can't make people say anything, and this is a double-edged sword. So
this is like Hitler Youth, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's like the pamphlet for that.
Go on to talk about we need to recognize gender binaries, that men are men and women are women, and that there's a reason for that. That's, I think, point number 9 or 10. But it's interesting, right? Because a lot of the Democratic politics right now want to force you to say people's chosen pronouns, or else suffer the consequences. Well, I think you can't have it both ways, right? Either you are a country that forces people to say words or you're not. So I'm very uncomfortable having a country that forces people to say things, but nevertheless, his number one priority is every child say the Pledge of Allegiance. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and we were not allowed to say the Pledge of Allegiance. So I often wonder what 6-year-old Natalie would do, because that was so uncomfortable, right? But what if it were federal law?
Right. Well, here's some of the other points on here. We're going to grow America's economy. Okay, great. I love that. But nowhere in here do you explain how you're going to do that. We're going to starve Washington's economy so that they're going to shrink the federal workforce, and they're going to stop socialism. Okay, because I guess socialism is on the march. I don't know where do you see where exactly do you see socialism on the march in the United States? I would really love to know that. We just literally eliminated multiple programs that would have actually helped people, but where is socialism on the march in the United States? Point to it. Show it to me, please. Please give me an example of this, you idiots.
Well, he talks about reducing government workforce by 25% in 5 years, selling off government buildings and assets, and getting rid of the old slow down, closed, top down government run for everything system we have today. It's worth noting that the government has grown under every single administration for the last 30 years, Republican and Democrat. So both sides like to talk a big game about it, but government continues to bloat no matter what.
Yeah, so he keeps referencing socialism here. We're going to protect, defend, and promote the American family at all costs, and we will stop socialism. We will not allow socialism to place the needs of the state ahead of the family.
He wants to finish the wall on the southern border and
well, hold on, let me go
it-
back to that.
Oh,
so
okay.
if you're going to make sure that the state is not funded ahead of the family, right? Where in here, I don't see any in your 11-point plans where we are going to reduce the amount we spend on the military industrial complex and make sure that American families are taken care of. I didn't see that in here. Did you see that in here?
Oh, no.
No. So
he does talk about building the southern border and defending our borders. So
okay,
I
we're
think
gonna build a
that
wall.
is more.
We're going to build a wall on the southern border, okay, just to be clear. And we are Americans, not globalists. We will be dependent on no other country.
That's so laughable.
Yeah,
I want to laugh right in his face.
And this is Rick Scott doing this, right? Not DeSantis.
No.
Right. This is Rick Scott. And by the way, it should be interesting to note about Ron DeSantis. He's been like sort of kept away from CPAC. Like he's not giving a speech. Like what's going on with Ron DeSantis, by the way? Like he was supposed to be like the next golden boy going to be running for president. And he's been like pushed aside.
Well, does he
all
support
of a sudden.
this new agenda?
I don't know. But this really doesn't sound like, a platform to do much of anything other than to.
It sounds
to
authoritarian.
Fight against cultural issues again.
Yeah, you're right.
With just a lot of hot air. I mean, great. I really support this plan. Again, this is politicians bloat. This is ridiculousness. None of these guys give a rat's ass about the American people. They pay lip service to it. They support the military industrial complex. He even says it right here. We will only help countries that are willing to defend themselves, like Israel. So what does that mean? That means we will still send billions of dollars to Israel because they can defend themselves? What the hell does that mean? So we will send you're good. You're Israel, you're good. We'll still send you $30 billion a year because you're good. Like,
Well, and
what
should
the
we
hell?
really
Does
trust-
that make any sense at all?
Should we really trust anyone that's going to give our kids like these rules and say to follow the 3 R's when 2 of those things don't start with R? Writing starts with a W
You're
and
right.
arithmetic starts with an A.
Oh yeah, what did I say? I was thinking.
Reading, writing.
So why I missed that one? Boy, am I
Reading's-
dumb. I guess I couldn't be a politician. Reading is the only one.
Yeah.
Where the hell did that phrase
the
come
three
from?
are sounding words is what they meant, I suppose.
We wonder why America's education system.
I think it's just like one of those no more teachers, no more books kind of. You know?
All right, Rick Scott.
Thank you, Richard Blackstone. Richard Blackstone.
I always feel like
Pointed
Rick
that
Scott looks like Fire Marshal Bill.
A little bit he does.
I think he looks like Voldemort that grew his nose out.
I'm the fire marshal.
I'm your Fire Marshal Bill. All right. Way to go here.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there's no actual proposal of balance a budget or anything like that or any. I mean, it's not a real plan. It's 11 talking points. It's basically an internal company memo.
Wouldn't it be great if we had a politician that came out and said, kind of in many ways like Bernie Sanders, we want to end our involvement in foreign wars eliminate the military-industrial complex, make sure that families have health care in the United States, make sure that Americans don't have to work 3 jobs in order to earn a living wage and be able to pay rent. Like, what about those things? Like, where have we gone? We're so far afield from that stuff.
Well,
3 jobs is American. Come on now.
Right.
It's a side hustle. That's one thing I actually did like about Paul Ryan. Like, he did think that we couldn't afford Medicaid and Medicare, and he wanted to remove those programs in order to balance a budget. And he did, like, Paul Ryan, would show up with spreadsheets and be like, we can't afford this, we can't afford this, we can't afford this, let's do this instead. But he was known as a geek, and people didn't really like him. I didn't agree with a lot of his social issues, but at least I like the guy who has the numbers, right?
Well, like Adlai
Not
Stevenson.
the talking points, the numbers.
But we don't elect people like that, like Adlai Stevenson, who knew the numbers. You just don't, he's not sexy enough. You just don't do that,
Ross Perot.
Yeah.
Who understood the numbers. Exactly. You just don't, unfortunately, we don't elect those people,
He was a bit like, I don't know. Remember that time you had Paul Ryan on your show and you guys offered him a cake and he's like, I don't eat sugar.
It wasn't me. It was on Chris Wallace's show.
Oh, and he was just like, I don't eat sugar.
He's
and
like, "I
that's
don't
the
eat
end of
sugar."
it. Like,
Yeah.
he was
They
a
brought him a
guy
cake
who
for
was
his
like,
birthday.
he was a serious guy. Like, he was willing to make certain sacrifices, that it's like,
That's
this
like-
is not what and I'm not saying Paul Ryan was a great leader. There's a lot I didn't agree with him in, but like, at least you have a real math plan.
And at least Paul Ryan he wrote a book on poverty. And so instead of just paying lip service to it, he said, he found that a lot of his Republican colleagues just didn't understand poverty, didn't understand working class poverty, didn't understand minority poverty in the United States,
Yeah.
didn't understand it. So he went and he spent the time researching it. He went to these communities in much the same way that Robert Kennedy did and was, transformed by it. And he wrote a whole book on it. So it was interesting. He's put in the time, and then of course now he's out of office.
Yeah,
Well, and I think
he's
that's
out
the
of
thing
politics.
that none of them do. It's like these people are so separated from the people they represent. Like they have no commonality with them whatsoever. They live a completely different life. They're over there, enriching themselves by taking lobby money and stuff. They've got no connection to us whatsoever. And it would. That's why I was saying it would be nice to dismantle Washington and make them live in their district, make them live around the people that they actually represent.
If you like this content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, we have a membership program. For the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support independent journalism just by going to morninginvest.com/join.
You get access to exclusive videos, plus the ability to join and chat with us live. We really appreciate your subscription, and you are supporting independent journalism.